you.
Thank you, John. Welcome, everyone. And looks like we have a very good group today. So hopefully I'll be able to touch base with something for everyone out of the presentation. It's always a challenge to be able to give a presentation in an hour on a feature, realizing that we have people from all different levels, some people who are just new to the product and other people who are seasoned users with advanced questions. So I've tried to make the presentation to give a little bit of food for thought for each one of you and hopefully introduce you to some new concepts that you haven't thought about before for PCLaw reporting. We are going to cover the internal reporting as well as some things that you can do to enhance that internal reporting. And then we're even going to take a look at what things can be done outside of the program to give you the data that you really truly want on your reports. It is a pleasure to be able to provide this webinar with LexisNexis. As John mentioned, it is a no-charge seminar and a great opportunity for anyone using the product to be able to learn new things about it. So in addition to this one, please look and make sure that you attend the others as well to make the maximum benefit from your application. I am Nancy Griffin, and as John mentioned, I am a proud member of 3545 Consulting Group that is office headquarters here in Houston and then with various locations across the country. We're going to start out today with the topic of how the reporting works in PCLaw. And a lot of times people are confused or perplexed or annoyed with the results they get when they generate a report out of PCLaw. There's a plethora of good reports in there. It's a matter of understanding what the report is actually trying to tell you, and then you much better understand how to interpret it. So we're going to talk about what they're supposed to match to and what reports are the best reports in order to get management information as well as financial information out of the application. I'm going to go over my 5 top reports and a little bit about how you can customize those within the application. So 5 reports that will help you from a management perspective run your law firm or law practice. We're going to talk about how to modify those PCLaw reports through the report writer within the program and even outside of the program in Notepad for the report definition. And then finally, we're going to take a look at what some of the magic that can be done as far as financial formatting of your P&L and balance sheet inside PCLaw using the tools that are there for you. We'll wrap it up with a quick view of what you can do outside of the program as well with report writers, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So one of the most important aspects whenever we're looking at reporting in PCLaw is understanding the date gates and what they really mean. There's 3 different dates that are involved in many of the reports, and so understanding how they apply will help you understand why sometimes the results are confusing. So it's important to understand the difference between the entry date, which is the date you actually use to put in your time entry or your expense entry, versus the invoice date versus the date of collection. And let me explain why that might be confusing. If I entered my time in September and generated all of my time report for September, and I reported that I had worked 190 hours in September, great. Well then, if we generate the bill for the time that was worked in September, we might actually date that invoice October 5th because that's the date it's actually going out to the client. If we dated our invoices for October 5th, the invoice date would actually be in October. So my time was entered in September, and then it was invoiced in October. Well, very unlikely that the client is going to pay it in the exact same month in which it was received. Hopefully they will, but if they end up paying it in November, which would still be within the 30-day time period, then I'm actually dealing with 3 different dates. So if I run a productivity report for the month of October, then I'm going to see time worked in October. And that's how we can end up with a stagger date, is what I call it, so that sometimes the reporting seems to be confusing, but in reality, PCLaw is giving us the information that we asked for on that report. Well, then there's some other reasons why your PCLaw reports may not match. Some reports will include the hold time. Any time that we put over in a hold category, where we may have said that we wanted to never bill it, we may have even chosen to show the description only, but we changed the hold flag. And if we did that, we have to be very careful that when we're running a report to make sure if we want to see all 190 hours that I worked in September, that I know whether or not that report is including my hold time. And here's an example. The Lawyer WIP Billing and Collection Summary is one of my absolute favorites in the program, because what it's showing us is what happened in a particular period. So in this example, we're looking at time that was worked, billed, or collected in this month, June 1st, 2012. In June, in that month, if I'm looking at these various segments, so I'm looking at billable time worked, this is a time that had an entry date that was in June. When I see the billings column, that's actually the time that was billed with an invoice date in June. So this may not relate to this at all. And then we have the third piece, which is collection. And that's based on a collection date when we received the payment from the client, also in June. So sometimes when I explain that, people will say, well, then this report isn't any good. Well, in reality, it's extremely good. It is giving it to us. We do have to understand that there's a stagger, but when the report is generated, you can actually generate it for an entire year. So you're going to capture productivity, even though it doesn't fall into the same segment or the same month, you'll be able to see the totals and get very meaningful information on productivity. So for Robert S. Brown, one report gives us a profile of billable time, billings, and collections, as well as the write-offs all on one screen. Over a period of time, excellent. But now if we notice, we did have some hold time, and so we have a difference here between the 163.70 and the 162 as far as the time that was actually worked. But hold time is not necessarily billable time, so I don't think we're necessarily losing anything in the translation on that report. So it's a great report. And this is where it's located. If you go to Reports, Productivity, and then to the Lawyer WIP Billing and Collection Summary, you have your individual choices for what you can actually generate. You can generate it for one timekeeper or leave that timekeeper open, and then you can actually generate it for an entire month if you choose. Great report, gives us the information that we need, and one to put in your collection bag for good reports for the end of the month. The other thing is to make sure that you are understanding the difference between the month to date and the year to date on the collection reports. So what we're looking at here next is the fees collected summary. So that fees collected summary report is going to show us the total collections either month to date or year to date for an individual working timekeeper, whether that's a lawyer or a paralegal. So now we're looking at this fees collected summary. And it shows us this month for an individual person, as well as this year to date, last year to date, and our percentage change. A great way to manage what we're doing from a cash collections perspective. And then over on the right-hand side, we're looking at the same perspective for the same attorney. So what's the difference between the fee credit and the responsible lawyer? Well, the fee credit always refers to the working attorney. So that's the person who actually did the work, whereas the responsible lawyer is the person who actually was designated on the matter manager as being responsible. And that responsible lawyer can actually be shared and a shared percentage. So we can see the difference for the functional role that each person was playing in order to participate in those collected dollars. Okay, so what are my top 5 reports and why do I think they're so great? It's hard to put only 5 on the list. I always want to put at least 10 or 15, but in reality, these are my favorite 5. We have only an hour, so we'll go through the 5 first. One is a built-in calendar report that allows you to actually see how many hours you put in on each day in a calendar view. And it's a great way to check to make sure that everybody has their time in, or it's a great way for an individual timekeeper to check to make sure their time is in. The calendar feature does have to be activated in order for this to work. So you do have to activate it in your system settings, and you do have to activate it on each individual lawyer or timekeeper so that they are able to have the calendar view. Once that's turned on, you can access it in a number of ways. It'll show as an icon on your toolbar, or it's a good thing to remember that it's only a click away when you're actually on your timesheet. So if you are in the timesheet area, notice at the very bottom of the screen you'll have these choices, and one of which is to jump out to the calendar. It's going to show you whether your daily goals are met because you can actually put in a daily target in the individual lawyer setup where the rates are set up, and you can also project, of course, to see what you're doing for the month. So in this example, we did a quick click to get out to this calendar, and we can see all of the days in white that are meeting the billable target. We can see 2 in red, often referred to that as a heat map, that did not hit the billable target. And we're looking at it at this time for one particular timekeeper. However, we could be looking at it for the entire firm. And in that case, we would select all of them instead of just one. And notice this gray area that gives us that total and whether or not we've hit what we've done for the month for our billable work versus non-billable work. If I wasn't sure what happened on that particular day, a quick double click on that cell and I will be jumping out to the detail of my time to be able to correct it, edit, or review it. Super, and always a click away. Just remember to turn on your calendar. Well, once we know that we have all of the time in, we certainly need to be able to manage our work in progress. That work in progress is our inventory, and for most people who bill by the hour, that is incredibly important. But even if you don't bill by the hour, if you bill flat fee or you bill contingent work, and yet your timekeepers do keep track of their time, this is the report that helps you manage how people are spending their time. If I'm working on a contingent case and the possible outcome for that contingent case is $25,000, and we feel like we have less than a 50-50 chance of recovering that amount, then it certainly would be wise to manage my time so that I don't exceed the potential and I don't overwork something that we don't have the ability to recover. And it's very hard not to do that if you don't have the numbers to be able to justify it. So a work in progress is important, in my opinion, for all firms. And you can find it under the Reports, Client, and then Work in Progress area. Notice on the screen that you have multiple different ways to view that. So you can summarize it by matter, summarize it by client, or even summarize it for the entire firm at your discretion. Always look across the top. Make sure that you have those buttons on the top of your screen. That is a setting, and you want to make sure that you have advanced choice turned on for reporting purposes so that you can actually see it. And then on the other tab, you've got all these choices about what to include. In the work in progress area, if I do want to include my non-billable and my never bill items, I have that option. So you want to look to see if you choose to include those or not. And remember that that's one of those areas that can make it look like your reports don't match up because you're including or excluding them on one report and not on another. Then we also have the ability to show disbursements and retainers on this report and a summary at the end. Sometimes the summary is all we want. We just want to see what's in the queue that can be billed, and maybe we want to see that by each responsible lawyer before we actually generate our bills for the month. In that case, I might want to select totals only and then include a summary at the end by responsible lawyer. You have other choices as well. Include or exclude your contingencies, or you could select specific areas of practice if you want to. And notice that we have this choice for department. If you haven't worked with department in PCLaw, it's a great choice, sometimes for being able to see work in progress, sometimes for being able to look at a work group in a collective way, sometimes for particular offices, for various different offices. So here's what that report looks like as it is summarized by individual matter. And it gives us the aging as well. Looks like I'm accumulating a lot here in that 121-day period. So that's a little bit disconcerting because I certainly want to make sure that it's not aging to the point where it's losing value. I do see the breakout between hours, fees, and disbursements as well as retainers. So I know what retainers are sitting there that I would be able to use on the billing. My next favorite report is the invoice journal, because the invoice journal is going to show me on a client-by-client basis the invoices that I generated for a particular period. So if I want to know what my billings were, and I want my billings to match up to the billing column on the Lawyer WIP billing and collection summary that we looked at earlier, this is the report that will help me do that. Just remember that when I put in the date gate here, I'm actually including the date for the invoices. So that would be the invoice date, and this report will generate the invoice date from 1/1/2013 through 1/31/2013. That's the date of the invoice, not necessarily when the work was performed. Now notice at the bottom of this I have a sort by choice, and very frequently you're given a sort by option when you generate a report. And you also have this layout choice. This is something that was added in the more recent versions of PCLaw. So I often find some of the people who are longtime friends of the program haven't really played or explored that area, and it's really fantastic. We're going to go into it a little deeper in a few minutes as I show you how to modify reports, but this is where you would go in any report that shows that layout allows you to add, change, remove, or modify the layout itself. It also gives us an advanced search. So if we wanted to search for a particular reduce the number, filter the number of invoices we're going to display on a report, we have, in addition to the Matters tab, where we can filter. We can use this advanced search in order to filter further. So what we're seeing is each and every invoice that was generated, we can do it in invoice order, and then we're seeing all the information as far as fees, disbursements, sales tax, write-offs, etc. Now supposing I don't want to see that sales tax column because in my state I don't have to worry about sales tax, well then perfectly fine. You can eliminate that column and give yourself more depth on it, as well as changing the font or the look and feel of the report. Notice at the bottom that I do have this summary, and I have the summary first by fee credit lawyer and then secondarily by responsible lawyer. We would not expect those numbers to match up because in the first area we're seeing the work that Barbara Angela performed herself. These are the entries that she actually generated that ended up on an invoice, and the invoice was dated in this date gate. So that's Barbara's working attorney fee credit. If Barbara is a responsible lawyer on 100 cases, then we would see below that, as a responsible lawyer, what her total billings were. So we would expect that this would match up to our billings for the month as long as we had the same date gate on our lawyer with billing and collection summary. Well, the next one you just can't live without, the accounts receivable listing. Critical. Accounts receivable is often referred to as the lifeblood of the firm. We have to know what we've billed out, but we also have to know how we're doing on collections. And the accounts receivable report is the one that will tell us that information. This time we only have an ending date, but we do have a date that we can backdate. So if I wanted to, and actually did that this last week, was looking at accounts receivable as of 12/31/2013 for a client filing their tax return for the deadline. So we wanted to be able to go back in time. In particular, we were looking at what the outstanding disbursements were for that period so that we could capitalize them correctly. But we have the accounts receivable, and then we have the choices of how we want to summarize it. Again, by matter, by client, by firm, and we can choose to show the balance as of the end date, and that's what we want to do when we're backdating. And it's a great report. A lot of times people will say, well, there's just too much on this report. I can't tell what I'm seeing because I may have printed it instead of summary by each matter. I may have printed it with the invoice detail, and that's too much. Or maybe I've got too many columns because there's a lot of stuff on there, and I don't need that many columns. Well, that'd be a great reason to go back and clean up the report and make it meet your specific needs, and then it would be a defined report. Instead of using the default, you could drop down and select any report format you wanted. But the information is excellent, and the aging is great, and it accompanies this report with the trust balance as well. Okay, so now that lawyer with billing and collection summary again. You can put in your collecting lawyer if you choose to, and of course that does give us that profile that I think is awesome and a great one over a period of time to help you evaluate. Oftentimes incentive compensation is based on the collections and helping everybody understand what's in the queue or what actually happened to the time. You really have to look at it over a period of time. Okay, well, I promised we were going to get down in a little bit into the depth of it by looking at how you could actually modify a report. So let's see how that works. On the built-in reports, we certainly have plenty of them to pick from, and sometimes that's a bit overwhelming as well. So how do you navigate that big long list? Well, they are grouped into categories, and productivity almost always is referring to the individual timekeeper, fee credit, attorney responsible, introducing. Those reports are going to be included under productivity. Accounts receivable is just what it says. We have multiple different views of it, but that's going to collectively give us our accounts receivable. And then the others that are really focused on the client performance. So instead of evaluating the individual attorney, we want to see what is our profitability on a particular client, then we want to go into that area. The practice management ones are all grouped together here under the calendaring and the contact list, etc. And then the general ledger reports are grouped at the bottom. So a lot more of the GL and then our audit trail. So they really do make logical sense. It's just that it's a bit overwhelming when you look at a very long list of reporting. Okay, so now let's look at one that can be modified, that accounts receivable by client. When we go into the report itself, then we do have that layout section and we have the ability to change it. When you first go in to this change area, very advisable to have a bottle of Excedrin handy, because the first time you look at it, it is definitely overwhelming. But I assure you, you can't hurt anything by going in there. The worst case is you're going to generate a report that you don't like a lot, so you can go back and fix it. Let's understand the lay of the land so that it doesn't seem quite so confusing to you. The first thing is it opens up the default report. So as much as we might like to say there's too much data on that detailed report, the advantage is that all the tokens that I could probably think about having are on that report. So if I want to modify it, all I have to do is start removing tokens instead of going out to try to figure out which ones are going to work and where they are. The very first thing you do is give it a new name, and you may name it anything you choose so that you'll be able to identify what report it is and get back to it later. Then you get to select the report font. Now be aware, if you think that the font is too small and you jump it up and make it a 12-point, then you might all of a sudden have fields that are overlapping and you'll get big red boxes all over the screen. So usually once I pare down all of the fields and eliminate the ones I don't want, then I go back and start playing with font, and that works out well. The title of the report is what's actually going to print at the top of the report, so you can entitle it anything you choose. If I wanted to say it was receivables by client per John, I could certainly do that. Now, this is what the report is actually going to look like. And we can click on certain areas, but other than that, all it's going to do when we do click on something is show us below which particular token we have. So let's understand how we actually move things around on that report. On the left-hand side, these are all the available tokens. So I could put in aging category. I could put in age for the number of days. So I know that I have some that are greater than 90, but I don't know how many days they are. I could remove the 90-day column, the greater than 90-day column, and simply put in a total for how many days old is that receivable. I can add any of these other elements, and you can scroll down, and there's just a bunch of them. So when I want to add one, I highlight it on the left, and then I click on Add to move it over into actually being on the report. As soon as I do that, it'll bounce to the bottom of my list. But because I already have this report filled in, that's really not where I want to start, because I'm going to fill up the report with tokens, and anytime we start to overlap tokens, they're going to show up as being red boxes, and it's going to give us a big warning that the report will not print, and it won't. So instead of jumping here, the best thing to do is to start with the name of the report at the top, and then to move down to the selected fields and start eliminating the ones you don't want. So if I go down to decided I don't want the bill to date, then I can highlight that one and remove it, and it will disappear. I have the ability to change the headings. So if I want to change the heading for a particular token, then I can do that over on the right-hand side and go into my heading area. It's displaying what my title is now for the bill to date. And then I can see by the numbers on the left which row that token is actually printing in. So I can see the client nickname is on the first row, and then I can see that the client name is also beside it on the first row. The header is above. So I have one row here and my header here. If I start to remove the business number, the matter number, or any of these additional fields, the headers will disappear as well. So I have a four-row report, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I can, if I eliminate things, then I have the ability to move other things up. And to do that, I simply highlight the token and use my up or down arrows to move it up and down, or side to side with the side to side arrows. And I can size it to make it smaller. By default, it's going to put in the nickname field at the size that the maximum size that it is. If I wanted, in my practice, I only have a 4-digit number for the matter, then I could make it smaller if I wanted to. This is my alignment. So if I want my numbers to right align, which would make sense, I'd want to change that. And if I want to type my length or type the starting or ending position, I can do that as well. So a lot of things that you can do. It will, if you have red boxes, it's not going to be happy about saving your report. But as I mentioned, the worst thing you can do is create a new report that you aren't happy with, but you can go back and modify. And then remember that we have that advanced search choice at the bottom. And that advanced search choice is great for being able to do Boolean logic. So I can come in and specify the field or the token that I want to filter on, and then I have a comparison choice in my drop-down menu. And that drop-down can be is equal to, starts with, has, is greater than, is less than, lots of different choices. And then I can say what I want it to compare to. In this example, I want to find something where the user is equal to admin. But I can put in anything, any of the tokens that are available, then I can filter on them. Well, and then there's another method of being able to modify reports in PCLaw. That is that the reports and that custom report that I actually created, the one that I was modifying, when I save it, it saves that report as a CRX. And that CRX report is going to be located in your PCLaw directory and then in the subdirectory called stat data. And that data folder will have all the report definitions. The report definitions can actually be opened up inside Notepad, or you can copy them if you choose to. So if I've created a report and it's a great accounts receivable report and it only has one row, and that's the way John likes to see it, but now I want to use it for Robin and I want to have it the same information, but she wants 2 more fields. Instead of having to start with the default report and then take all those 100 fields off to get Robin's report, I could just go out to my stat folder and copy the report and then paste the report, give it a different name, and then I would be able to go back into the front end of the program and add Robin's 1 or 2 fields and go to lunch. So it's a much easier method of being able to duplicate a report. If you have some programming knowledge, then you'll see that you can actually open up the report itself, and all of these codes, or all of the code that's here, is what actually runs the report. And if you know what you're doing, you can modify directly in that code. Okay, well, the next area to talk about is the financial statements. I am a big fan of making sure that all your data is together under one umbrella, and PCLaw is a perfect program for doing that. From the time entry and the expense entry, the flow through of our accounts payable to the client ledger, to being able to generate a bill and produce that bill, and then to be able to report on the productivity, great. But if you add in that financial statement production, then you really have the full flow of data and the true benefit of the program. Because if you're filling it all in correctly, then you should be able to produce financial statements out of PCLaw that are great. One of the complaints that I've heard is, but my financial statements don't look right. They're only, I just have all the accounts and I don't have any grouping. And in some of the other programs that I've worked with, you know, I can make them pretty. And my reaction is, there's really not anything I haven't found you can't do in PCLaw. It's a matter of setting it up correctly, and then a matter of being able to produce that information. Even something as complex as showing your P&L by the individual, not work group, but the individual type of person. So this particular income statement is showing the accounts grouped. Obviously we have more than just these accounts, but I'm breaking them into groupings. So I'm looking at revenue, but then I'm also looking at direct expenses. So these are the expenses that are directly associated with an individual person. So I'm looking at the partner group, and I can see the partner revenue, and then I can see the partner direct expenses. And I can do the same thing for my associates, paralegals, legal assistants, etc. It's just a matter of setting up the accounts correctly and then posting to those individual accounts. So I can see however I want that presentation, and this one is quite sophisticated. Here's another example, and now what I'm doing is taking those individual associates and I'm breaking them out into their own individual P&L, and I can see them side by side. This is an example for a firm that has a number of associates and also a number of partners. But the very same thing works if we have two partners in a single firm and we want to be able to see side by side their revenue and expense. It doesn't have to be grouped. It can be all of the expense accounts together, or it can be having them grouped into certain segments and then broken out by individual person. So grouping can also be vertical in the sense that I could see all of my fee income grouped together in one section, and then I could see outside income. Maybe I have rental income. Maybe we own our building and we rent out a portion of the building, or we have subtenants that lease from us. Then I can see my interest as well as my miscellaneous income. Expenses can be grouped as well. And so I can see the major expenses and then watch what it's actually doing as far as my comparison to last year to date or this year to date. And those headings or those choices are available in the financials as well. So what you do in order to accomplish that is open up those GL accounts and look at all of the choices that you have. The GL account, of course, has its nickname and its name, and that's usually where most people stop looking. But at the bottom, we have a category, a cost center, a department, and the ability to do sub-accounts. So if I wanted to have a grouping account that was an automatic grouping account, I would create it as an account, and then I would put all of the children into that parent account, so that PCLaw would know how to group them automatically. So now what you can actually do is you can have an individual that has a department of their own, and we might want to set up a job title that is a cost center. We might want to set up groups of accounts as categories, and then groups of account in ranges in order to produce those financials. So if we remember that we could set up on each account, you can code a department, you can code a cost center, and you can code a category, then you know that on the report itself we can actually put in ranges of accounts so that we can allow those financials to print. This is the actual report itself in the report designer. So it's similar to the one that we looked at before, except this time we're actually producing general ledger. And we're able to filter those individual accounts based on the category or the cost that we want to include. So a partner, a single fee revenue account for an individual partner can be included in a token or excluded based on the filter, which is you'll see as a right click, and that's where we actually filter the account. So it's extremely sophisticated. Again, anything you can imagine can be created. And if it doesn't work exactly in the front end, you can always open it up and make a modification to add numbers together as well. The actual range comes under this limits area. So in the limits area, that by natural default would be all of our revenue accounts sequentially, and then all of our expense accounts sequentially, and that's what produces the two different segments. But you can limit any row you choose by any range that you want to filter by. And there's an example of that range, and then our final result once we put in all of those filters. And at the department code being used for an individual, you can have each person set up as a department if you choose, and then that way you can actually print the built-in default financial statement by department, which has an extra header built into it, and that is one of the built-in ones. As long as you have your department set up correctly and defined, that you can use a built-in report from PCLaw. So that's how we use the combination of the two in order to get the exact results that we want. And likewise, our little sections to be able to get the section and the grouping. Well, supposing that I wanted to go beyond just what's built into PCLaw. Supposing I want to generate or create my very own reports. If you have, everybody that has the program has the option of being able to run their software with a SQL database. So if you do have Microsoft SQL or Microsoft SQL Express, if you have that installed, the latter not being a chargeable product from Microsoft, then you open up a whole new world or a whole new capability of being able to generate reports through SQL. If you're on the C-Tree version and haven't gone to the SQL version, you can do the same if you set up an ODBC driver for the C-Tree version. But the SQL version has come a long way in the last few years, And as I mentioned, it opens up all sorts of possibilities for being able to report. This is an example of some of the things that can be done. This is a dashboard that we actually wrote at our product that's called Business Pulse. And you can see that we have multiple different panes or panels in to give a productivity profile for individual staff members with lots of interactivity. With this report, or these multiple reports, were actually written in SQL reporting services. But you can just as easily connect your SQL database to Excel, or you can connect it to Microsoft Access, and then you can start to generate all sorts of independent reports from the program as well. And yet another example of what can be done in a little bit of creative thought and what information you wanted. PCLaw has added in those dashboards for us that came in 13, and they have great promise of being able to do all sorts of complicated things. A super introduction, and with version 14, even more options available to us. Okay, John, looks like we're just coming into the 10-minute mark, so we might want to go ahead and open it up for some questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nancy, for your very informative session. This does conclude the presentation portion of our webinar. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them via the questions pane located on your webinar control panel. Okay, the first question is how to do a search on the calendar.
How to do a search on the calendar. I wonder if they're talking about how to get the individual person's filtered. Maybe what the question is asking. If not, if the caller will identify it a little bit further, that'd be great. The filter on the calendar is based on the selection criteria that's put over here, so you can actually click inside that white box and select the timekeeper that you want. The month, you can move forward or backward on the month in order to get to the right place. And then there are additional filters here as well. So if I wanted to filter certain elements, then I can do that also. If I want to search, I do have a search on the top. I do always, almost every screen in PCLaw, there's a place to search. So I do have my binoculars that will enable me to search as well. And I can always generate a report from right inside that screen.
Okay, another question. We actually have a couple that are related to the calendar. The next one is, how do I select all attorneys on the calendar?
If you double-click inside that box, then you will be able to see a choice on the right-hand side to select all. Or if you just empty the box, so if you open, just take out the initials that are there, then you should be filtering for all of them. There was a bit of a problem with the filtering on an early release of 13. That was fixed in the service release, so make sure you are on the current service release if you're still on 13, and then of course with 14 that's also fine.
Okay, why does the calendar information keep changing? I want to know what a person worked and don't care if it was WD, WO, or made NB.
Oh, so if someone wants to actually see the total hours, they don't care whether it was billable or non-billable. They want to see the complete total hours. Well, unfortunately, it is going to show us the breakdown between the two, and we're going to see the breakdown over on the left-hand side. That's an interesting point. I've never thought of it or never even thought to ask for the developers to do that, but it's a great suggestion for enhancement to be able to do that.
Okay. What is the programming language for the reports in the Notepad?
It's really kind of in an XML language. It's a little bit, it's unique to PCLaw because inside the actual report itself, there are tokens that are included, and the tokens are numeric. They relate back to the actual program itself, and there is a list of tokens as far as what the translation is, what the token number means, so you know which one is going into the report. But oftentimes what I'll do is open up a blank report, take all the fields out, put the tokens in that I want for my final report, or if I want to calculate on a token, and then go open it up in Notepad, and then I can easily see what the token numbers are in order to be able to combine them in a formula.
Okay, going back to the question earlier on how to select all attorneys on the calendar, the attendee that asked the question, I guess, has tried what you explained and commented back that it isn't working.
If it is not working, check under your help about to make sure that you are on the current release of the program. As I mentioned, there was a little problem. It was, you could make it work, but you had to click several times to get it to clear. And remember that after you change a selection, you want to click on that refresh button to make sure that you're getting the refresh with all of your people. If that still doesn't work, then I recommend a call to tech support, and they'll help walk you through it. We have a great tech support team from Lexis.
Okay, if the firm is not currently using departments, sorry, my screen just shrunk. How hard is it to set up to start using departments?
It really isn't. It depends on, my preference is not to post revenue by department, but to continue to post revenue by individual person so that you can see it broken out either way. But in order to add those departments, it's under your list, your options, and then lists, and you'll see that there's a department definition. You can go into that area and then define what your departments are, go back to your GL accounts, and then identify the account that belongs to the department. So that's really all there is to it. It won't change anything that you already have. It won't change the presentation of an existing financial statement that simply has revenue and expense, but it gives you the additional added capability of being able to use that department. And I'll see if I can get back to that other one. Or do we have another question, John? I was going to see if I could get back on it.
Several more here.
Okay, we'll keep going.
On the accounts receivable report, how do you make the entire last payment amount show up? I only get amounts paid when there is still an amount owed. It doesn't always reflect the entire amount paid.
It doesn't always reflect the entire amount paid on the accounts receivable. Okay, by definition, because what we're doing is, if we're showing an accounts receivable as of a certain point, that would eliminate the payment that happened earlier. Let me explain. So let's say, for example, we had an invoice that was generated in January, and in February it was for $1,000, and then in February the client paid $500. If I run the accounts receivable as of the end of February, the only amount that's owed is $500. So I'm not going to see the payment to date. It's an interesting question, though, because I'm not certain that we don't have a token that would give you that complete payment, even though a portion of the invoice had been paid. So it is possible to generate a report that does exactly what you want, I think, which is the total amount of the original billings, the amount of the payment that has been applied, and then the remaining balance of the accounts receivable with aging. And that would be very important to know, has the client paid any at all or none at all to date. So interesting question. The tokens are available. It would just be a matter of putting them on the correct report.
Okay. The next question says, when doing time entry for clients, attorneys are not linking appointments to clients. Do I need to search the calendar by client name?
Oh, so that's a searching for actually being able to find the client that's associated with a particular appointment, or was the question saying that they weren't linking them?
It says when they're doing time entry for clients, the attorneys are not linking appointments to the clients.
Okay, and so if they're putting things on the calendar without the client being associated, now they're trying to turn that into a time entry and they don't know the client necessarily who was associated. Well, the problem is you want to associate the appointment with the client. That's the true benefit of a calendar inside PCLaw. Any other calendar, if we're working with Outlook or we're working with a Google Calendar, doesn't matter what application we're in, the problem is that it doesn't have the association of the client. So including the client on the appointment, to me, is the majority of the benefit in that calendar. Then you have the ability to see a calendar report by client, or automatically on the Matter Manager, you can go and see all the appointments associated with an individual matter.
Okay. Can we get a sample of a category GL setting for an income statement?
A sample of the category setting. Let me see if I can get us to the GL section real quick. And so the category and the cost center, both of those are number of characters, and off the top of my head I'm trying to remember which is which. One is I think they're both two-digit fields. So the category is one that you would type in. So for example, if I wanted to use the category for my partners, then I would make the category 01 for all of the partner revenue accounts. So if Robert S. Brown is a partner and I want the category to follow, then I could put him in the 01. Now, I could just as easily create a department, and the department could be partners, and that would be perfectly fine. I could do it either way. In my example, in order to get the filtering and grouping of all the different moving parts, I actually used a category, a cost center, and the department. And that's what enabled me to have it grouped both vertically and horizontally. But the category is really a user-defined. There's not a lookup list for the category or the cost center. You simply type them in. The department does come from the lookup list, and you do define the department in that lookup list so that they will flow through to the GL filter.
Okay. How can I see a split of fees and disbursements on my accounts receivable report?
Those are tokens, and you can go in to get that breakout. You are missing the totals. I will tell you that, the total in the bottom of the grid, but there is a token for the fees versus the disbursements, which to me is very, very important for two reasons. You want to manage them very differently. Fees, I'm concerned about recovering. Disbursements, I'm exceptionally concerned about recovering, so because that's cash that's already gone out the door. So being able to break them out is important. But they are two separate tokens that you can pick in the list. They're just further down.
Okay. Do not quite understand where to go to get started to create a new financial report by department or groups. There is no advanced search on the GL reports.
You are correct. That's absolutely correct. So you do have to go into the template editor, which is on the very top of the screen, and you're going to go into, I could think of the top menu choice. I've done it too many times. There's a template editor. If you search it in the help, you'll find the screen. It's under Tools and then Template Editor. So if you go from the top bar to Tools, and then you'll see the Template Editor, you can go in there and you can edit your checks, your financial statements, the general ledger. You can change the look of the general ledger. That's one that I automatically have my own GL format that I copy into the stat data for the clients because it includes the client name to make sure that we build back all of our expenses, and then it also prevents an overlap when you print. Any of those, it's not accessed from the filter screen, but you actually go into the template editor.
Okay, and we have two last questions here. What do the colors mean in the staff calendars, for example, red, green, and gray?
You can actually change the different appointment colors for the individuals. So if I wanted to assign John the color blue and I want to assign Robin purple, then when I look at a combined calendar, not just the heat map for time, but if I look at the combined calendar, I'm actually able to distinguish between the two because of the color. So there's color coding by individual, which is great when you're looking at a combined one.
Okay, and the last question, I don't see department option under work in progress / other report. Is this a setting? I am using department codes.
There, under the work in progress, there's two. Some of the reports do have a department choice on the Matters tab. It appears over to the right. If it doesn't appear on the right-hand side, then sometimes it's available in the search criteria. I'm trying to remember if the work in progress in particular, if that's a token that's available to you. But it generally is on the Matters screen, and it's over on the right. There's also a category choice that you can select from the right as well. Department choice doesn't show up until you've activated your departments, though.
Okay, that does conclude the webinar for today. I would like to thank Nancy once again for her expert advice on today's topic, and to all of our attendees for taking time out of your day to join us, as well as ask a lot of good questions.
They were great.